Hello, and welcome to this video on dealing with the sensory deprivation of remote working. It sounds like a very strange title, doesn't it? I'm here sort of with a foggy background because in some ways, when you are responsible for a team and that team is not physically present, it can sometimes feel like you're operating in a bit of a fog. A manager recently said to me, I've been a manager for a long time, but I'm used to managing with all of my senses. Yes, sight, yes, hearing. He said, but it's more than just that. I get a feel for the atmosphere of the working environment. He said, sounds like a strange thing. He said, but I can smell when something's wrong. And they said, I like to sort of be quite a hands-on manager. I want to get in there and feel and touch and all of that stuff. He said, and suddenly, when it comes to remote working, I feel like I've been deprived of many of those senses, hence the sensory deprivation of the title. So I thought I'd put together 10 quick tips, and I'll try and go through them at quite a rapid pace here. 10 quick tips which might help to overcome some of that sensory deprivation, or at least to ameliorate it a little bit. I'm going to look at 10 tips. Tip 1 is, it's not going to be as good as face-to-face. Remote working is not as good as face-to-face, but there are still lots of advantages to focus on, and we should focus on those advantages. Whilst, yes, it's brilliant to have the person there, let's not lose sight of all of the disadvantages of that. Sitting in traffic jams, lengthy journeys to and from work, the cost of that. In some cases, if you have workers from overseas and members of your team coming together, you've got hotel costs and you've got time away from your family and you've got the impact on the environment. And of course, the nice thing with remote working is you can, get up in the morning wherever you normally are and you can be in that meeting very quickly. I had a friend in London who found herself before the lockdown saying, oh, I hate all of this Zoom and all of this Skype and stuff. Since then, she's now become quite an expert on it and has got to the stage of saying, I can't believe how my productivity has risen as a result of it. Suddenly, it would take me, a morning to get across London to have my meeting and then the rest of the morning to get back. She said, in the space of that, I can actually have 4 meetings in the time that it used to take 1. So you're right, it's never going to be as good as face-to-face, but there are still many advantages, and we should focus on those a little bit. Tip 2. When people are remote and they're by themselves, it's easy to lose sight of the organization as a whole. What can you as a leader, what can you do as a manager, what can you do as a team leader do to support them in this one? Well, here's one simple tip on that one. Brand everything. When you're doing your webinars, your Skype calls, your video calls, whatever else it is, make sure that you've got the company branding somewhere on the slides behind you. If you're sending out material, even if you wouldn't normally do it, make sure it's branded. Try and make sure that you're reminding them at every opportunity that they are part of the organization, rather than just getting unbranded materials. Number 3, it can be really tempting with remote teams to keep everybody involved in everything. After all, it's relatively straightforward to do. It's just as easy to get 6 people in a WebEx as it is to get 1. But in addition to your group work, let's not forget that each of us have our individual needs. All of us need to feel special. And if you really do want to keep understanding your team and learning about your team, try not to lose sight of those one-to-ones, those all-important ones. You've saved yourself a lot of time traveling anyway, so there should be even more time for one-to-one communication, even though it's remotely with your teams. And that way you can look at them, you can listen to them properly, you can learn and you can understand them. So don't forget, don't keep it just as group meetings all the time. Make sure you've got one-to-ones too. So in terms of the senses, There are some sensors we can still use very well in our remote workings. And of course, sight is one of them, thanks to the cameras that we have. But make sure, as tip 4, that you use your camera well. We used to use a lot of this stuff just as a technological tool. More and more, we're beginning to realize it is now the way of managing our teams. And there is an element of performance to it. When you're talking to the camera, make sure you're looking at the camera. It's like you're maintaining eye contact with your team. It's true, you can't see them, but they can certainly see you looking at them. It's not a coincidence that when TV presenters are working with an autocue, I'm not working with an autocue, by the way, but when TV presenters are working with autocue, that autocue is often positioned right in the camera eye line. So as the presenter is reading the camera, it looks like the presenter is talking directly to the audience, and so should you. Try to make sure that when you're working with these tools, that you're not focused on looking at your image in the bottom corner or the top corner and going, oh, my hair's not very good today. My hair's never very good for obvious reasons, but try to make sure that you're focusing on them. When they're speaking, you're looking at them on their images, but when you're talking to them, look at the camera so that it looks to them as though you're talking directly to them. Tip 5, make sure their cameras work and that everybody knows how to use it. And here we're going to have to be increasingly tough with our IT departments. I was in a webinar recently where there were a lot of people, about 20 members of a team, and I would have suggested there were maybe 5 or 6 of them who had their mics on mute and their webcams off. How on earth as a manager can you engage with those people when you don't even know if they are sitting there watching any part of this webinar or listening to any of this part of the webinar at all? It's very difficult. So I would insist on it as a discipline that when you're working with your teams remotely and you're trying to communicate with them, that you can see them. And that means get their cameras on. And if you get to any stage where a camera isn't on, it's worth investigating. Is it because they don't quite know how to use it? Is it because they don't have the right broadband access? Or is it there's a technological issue to go ahead with there? So if you've got any of those, make sure that they know how to use their cameras. So that's a little bit on sight on the sensors. Hearing is another one of them that we can use quite well. And for this, I have 2 major tips. Headsets. I'm a huge fan of headsets. Think about it. I know they look a bit pretentious. I know everybody hates sort of the Madonna aspect of it. When you're sitting there in a business meeting, can look a little bit call center perhaps. But there is a technological reason why you should. If somebody is listening to a call, especially if it's a group call, and they're listening without a headset, as I speak to my team, my voice comes out of their speakers, and if they haven't got their microphones on mute, it goes back into their microphone and creates a feedback loop. So that's why we sometimes get delays. It's why we sometimes get echoes. It's sometimes why we get all kinds of interference and hisses and buzzers and stuff like that. I think it also makes it a lot easier to hear everybody without too much background noise. And that's sort of tip 7 there. Get people to mute their microphones, but not all the time. Muting their microphones because you've got dogs in the background, or you've got children in the background, or you've got police cars going out, or air conditioning, as I discovered when I did a session for some teams in Singapore very recently. So get people to mute their microphones. It makes it easier to hear whoever is speaking, but not all the time. If you're going to get over this sensory deprivation, as a manager, as a leader, you need some feedback from them. So make it, again, another discipline, another standard part of any communication you have on a one-to-one or a group with your team, that at some stage everybody, every member must unmute their microphone to make some form of contribution to that session. You would expect them to in a face-to-face, although we wouldn't necessarily vocalize it. In a face-to-face, I could look round everybody, is everybody okay? And I'm looking for nods and smiles and sort of eye contact. Much harder when it comes to things when we're doing it remotely, so you need them to vocalize it where possible, and therefore get them to mute, just not all the time. Other things you can do, and this is very much about moving away from the hearing, or an overlap if you like, to one last sense that we can use within our remote working with our teams. And that's our emotions, our feelings. We can still get that. And the way we do that, tip 8 here, is get people involved in the call. Ask them questions and make them answer, make them be part of it. Give them tasks to do, give them things to prepare, contributions to make during your meetings, during your calls, etc. With some, Skype, for example, you can set up parallel Skype meetings whereby you can give people tasks to do within a meeting and get them to go away and work on small groups and to bring that back. And that gets another feeling. And it means being involved. I don't feel like a passive recipient. It is involving another sense, but this time an internal sense of being part of the overall thing. And I guess tip 9 is sort of an extension of that. Solicit feedback. Keep asking them. It can feel really hard as a manager when you're working remotely with your teams, as though you're hitting a brick wall, as though you're giving everything and getting nothing back from them. So keep asking them for feedback. How are they feeling? What do they think about the project? What are their thoughts on the way forward? And keep posing and demanding and soliciting that feedback from them. And my last tip here is probably one of the most powerful of all. Share control. Don't feel when you are remote working with your teams as though it always has to come from you. Get them to do as much of the work as possible and present back to you. Share it between you. Like many families, since the lockdown, a lot of us have been doing quizzes on Skype and on Zoom, and my family is no different. But probably our favourite quiz is our Saturday night quiz, where we have 6 households, and each household, each week, takes responsibility for sorting out the questions for one of the rounds in that quiz. And it's by far the most fun quiz that we have, because everybody looks forward to their round where they can ask their questions and hopefully bamboozle grandpa or grandma or mum or dad or cousins. They love the fact that they can tease each other about your questions were harder than mine. And then when it's somebody else's turn, there's a heightened sense of involvement. One, there's a relief that yours went okay, and there's a heightened sense of involvement of wanting to be fair to the others. So get other people, share that control. Give everybody part of the responsibility for a section of your meetings. So just 10 short tips there. We're not going to overcome all of them. But if we can really get that sense of sight with the cameras, and we know how to use it, and we've got them to use theirs. We've got the sense of hearing in terms of the headsets, muting the microphones, but not all the time. We've got the sense, the feeling, the involvement, the participation of sharing control, soliciting feedback, involving them in the meeting somehow. Like anybody who's been deprived of a sense, the myth often is that other senses have to overcompensate. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I do know we do have to do that in terms of overcoming that sensory deprivation. And if we do, then maybe it doesn't matter so much that we can't actually get out there and have the touchy-feely or even worry about the fact that we can't smell.